From the outside, Daniel Mercer had the kind of life that inspired envy. In Chicago, he lived on a quiet street lined with maple trees and wind chimes. His wife, Claire, was warm and efficient, an elementary school teacher who packed perfectly balanced lunches and remembered every dentist appointment. Their kids, Max, 11, and Ellie, 8, adored their father. Daniel coached Max's little league team and read Ellie bedtime stories with voices for every character. He was the man who shoveled neighbors' snow without being asked. A rock. A provider. The good one in their circle of friends. But every other Friday, Daniel kissed Claire goodbye at 6:10 a.m., duffel bag slung over his shoulder, and told her he had a weekend retreat with a high-profile client in Minneapolis. Instead, he headed straight to O'Hare, boarded a flight to Denver, and, somewhere over the Midwest, became someone else. In Denver, he transformed into David Monroe. Gone were the tailored suits, the clean-shaven jaw. He let his beard grow in just enough to cast shadow and age. He wore cardigans, mumbled a bit more, and always carried a weathered leather notebook to sell the fiction that he was a struggling novelist. His home there was modest, an apartment above a bakery in the Highlands. His wife, Julia, was vibrant, sharp-witted, and ran a small fusion restaurant that did well with the weekend brunch crowd. She believed David, her David, was writing a book titled The Longest Silence, a metaphor-laden epic about betrayal and fatherhood. She often joked that when it was done, she'd be the one doing book tours. Julia's daughter from a previous relationship, Lily, 6, had taken to David as if he were her biological father. She clung to his leg when he arrived and cried when he left. He braided her hair badly, but she always said it was perfect. Daniel was two complete men, living two full realities. And he thrived in both. Until the cracks started showing. It began innocently. Lily's kindergarten teacher, Ms. Rafferty, called Julia after noticing Lily's drawings. "They're beautiful," she said. "But some of them, they're a little confusing." In one drawing, Lily had drawn two families, two houses, two mommies, and two kids that weren't her. "That's just Daddy's other story," Lily chirped, when asked. "The one with the snow and the dog." Julia smiled awkwardly. She thought it was a creative imagination, maybe inspired by David's unfinished book. But she couldn't shake the odd tone in the teacher's voice, or the familiarity in those words. A house with snow. A dog. David hated dogs. At least, she thought he did. Meanwhile, back in Chicago, Claire started noticing Daniel's travel bags always smelled faintly of yeast and cinnamon, like pastries, not conference room coffee. He had a new kind of tired behind his eyes. Not from work, but from performance. Daniel had rehearsed every excuse, every habit, every time zone difference. But now, something was tightening. Unspoken. Unraveling. And for the first time in over a decade, Daniel Mercer, David Monroe, wasn't sure how long he could keep both lives from crashing into each other. The unraveling began not with a bang, but with a receipt. Julia had always trusted David. She was too busy with the restaurant to micromanage his comings and goings. But one rainy Wednesday afternoon, while reorganizing the junk drawer in the kitchen, where batteries and coupons and old menus went to die, she found a receipt folded between takeout flyers. It was from a boutique hotel in downtown Milwaukee, dated 2 weeks ago. A suite. 2 nights. 2 breakfasts. One name. Daniel Mercer. She stared at it so long the paper began to crinkle under her grip. David always claimed he was writing at the cabin up in Boulder. But what novelist uses a different name to book a hotel? Her mind raced, split, rewrote possibilities. An alias for privacy? A pseudonym? Or, was she living with a ghost wearing someone else's skin? She didn't confront him. Not yet. She waited, watched. Checked his laundry, his pockets, his eyes. Everything suddenly felt like a lie. That same week in Chicago, Claire was trying to sync Daniel's calendar to her own. A couple's getaway was long overdue, and she wanted to surprise him. But his phone, a new model he never fully explained, kept buzzing on the kitchen counter while he was in the shower. She wasn't the snooping type. Not normally. But when a message preview lit up the screen, she froze. "Miss you already, Jules." Claire's heart stuttered. Jules. The name was affectionate. The emoji. Intimate. She tapped it once, then again. No password. The thread was short, mostly one-sided, but suggested familiarity. "I'll see you soon. Safe flight. Thanks for last weekend." A cold wave surged through her chest. Claire sat on the edge of the bathtub, phone in hand, listening to the water run behind the curtain. Something fractured quietly in her. That night, Daniel came home smiling, oblivious. He brought her favorite Riesling. He asked how Max did on his math test. Kissed Ellie on the forehead. He looked so normal, so practiced. But in both cities, Claire and Julia had begun to see through him, each from different angles. The facades he'd so carefully constructed were wearing thin, and Daniel could feel it, like water pressure rising behind thin glass. He called off his next Denver trip abruptly, citing a last-minute crisis with a corporate merger. Julia sensed he was lying but didn't push. Meanwhile, he canceled dinner plans with Claire, claiming food poisoning, though he looked healthy as ever the next day. The cracks widened fast. And then, he disappeared. One Friday morning, he left Claire with a kiss and a back Sunday night, but never arrived in Denver. Julia called. No answer. Then voicemail. Then nothing. His cell signal died in Kansas. Claire, used to his weekend silences, didn't worry, until Sunday came and went, and the kids asked why Daddy hadn't called to say goodnight. Monday morning, both women received the same email. No subject line. No signature. Just a blank body. And then, one line. "Forgive me. This wasn't supposed to go on this long." That was it. No trace of him after that. No bags at O'Hare. No check-ins. His car was found in long-term parking with the key under the seat. Inside the glove box, a burner phone with no contacts. Claire stared at her reflection in the car window. Julia clutched Lily's stuffed bunny in her hands, realizing he hadn't even said goodbye to the child who called him Daddy. The man they thought they knew had vanished. Not just fled. Evaporated. And neither of them knew yet just how many names he'd worn, or how many lies were still to come. For a week, Claire couldn't sleep. Her body went through the motions, school drop-offs, grocery runs, folding laundry, but her mind was locked in a loop, stuck on Daniel's final words. "Forgive me. This wasn't supposed to go on this long." She read it dozens of times, hoping for clarity. Was it a cry for help? A goodbye? Or a warning? In Denver, Julia fared no better. She paced the apartment above the bakery, replaying every moment from the past year. The hotel receipt. Lily's drawing. The distant look in David's eyes over the last few weeks. It all added up now, but to what, exactly? Both women filed missing persons reports. Claire told police she feared her husband had suffered a breakdown. Julia, too ashamed to admit she'd been lied to, told a cleaner version. Her fiancé had left suddenly, possibly suicidal. It wasn't until a cross-reference flagged Daniel Mercer and David Monroe on separate reports, with matching photos, that the truth detonated. Claire was called in first. A young officer with a nervous jawline showed her Julia's report. She stared at it for nearly a minute before she said anything. "I don't know who that woman is," she said flatly. "But she's married to my husband." Julia came in later that day, bracing for judgment, but what she found in Claire's eyes wasn't anger, it was shock. A shared ache. Like standing across from your own reflection and seeing bruises in the same place. Their first conversation wasn't calm. Voices were raised. Accusations flew. "How long have you known? You must have suspected." But eventually, the fire burned down. Neither of them was the enemy. They were co-conspirators in a lie they never signed up for. Claire showed Julia photos of Daniel in Chicago, dressed like a businessman, clean-cut, laughing with Max and Ellie on a sledding hill. Julia countered with a video of David baking cookies with Lily, wearing a flannel and humming Springsteen. Same man. Same smile. But completely different souls. The weight of it made Claire sit down. I don't know who I've been married to for 12 years, she whispered. Do you? No, Julia said. But I thought I did. They found themselves talking long into the evening. About Daniel's tells, the way he always left the room to take calls, the strict routines, the vague excuses. And about themselves, Claire's guilt for not noticing, Julia's shame for believing him. They traded timelines, dates, missed birthdays, cancelled weekends. The puzzle fit together far too easily. And as the outline of Daniel's secret life came into focus, another realization began to emerge, one that neither of them had dared speak yet. What if he isn't coming back? Or worse, what if this wasn't a breakdown, but an exit strategy? That night, as Claire drove home through Chicago traffic, Max asked from the back seat, "Is Dad okay?" She didn't know how to answer. And miles away in Denver, Julia sat by Lily's bed as the child whispered, "I think Daddy got lost in his story." The women didn't know it yet, but someone else had started digging. A woman with her own reasons for wanting Daniel Mercer exposed. And she was already closer than they realized. Naomi Ridge was the kind of reporter who thrived on the hunt. At 33, she'd built a reputation in Dallas for digging beneath the surface, exposing fraudsters and con artists who preyed on the vulnerable. She wasn't just driven by curiosity, she had a personal vendetta. Years ago, a charming man had scammed Naomi's mother out of her life savings. Since then, Naomi had vowed to uncover the truth behind every lie, no matter how well disguised. When she first heard about the missing man with 2 families, her instincts flared. 2 lives. 2 identities. It was too clean, too bizarre to be coincidence. Her newsroom gave her the green light to dig. Naomi began by combing through flight records between Chicago and Denver. She traced Daniel's travel patterns, cross-checking hotel bookings and credit card withdrawals. The numbers didn't add up. Some flights were booked under aliases she'd never heard of, Miguel Reyes, Mark Bennett, John Caldwell. Next, she cracked open social media. She found separate Facebook profiles for Daniel Mercer and David Monroe, both meticulously curated, both showing photos that never overlapped. There was no digital footprint for a Miguel Reyes, but Naomi suspected that was the point. She contacted Claire and Julia under the guise of a sympathetic journalist wanting to help. Both women were wary but desperate, sharing information that painted a picture Naomi hadn't expected, a man who'd maintained 2 families for over a decade, flawlessly compartmentalizing every part of his life. And then came the breakthrough. Naomi discovered a bank account with large cash deposits and transfers scattered across multiple states, and all under the name Miguel Reyes. It was linked to a small trust fund in a little-known branch in El Paso, Texas. Naomi felt a thrill. This was no ordinary disappearance. Daniel, or David, or Miguel, was a chameleon with layers deeper than anyone had guessed. She sent a text to her editor. This story just got bigger. But as she dug deeper, strange things started happening. Her burner phone buzzed with untraceable calls, no voices, just heavy breathing. Her car was keyed in a dark parking lot. Emails with veiled threats arrived. Naomi didn't flinch. If anything, it fueled her determination. Someone wanted the truth buried, but she was ready to pull it all out into the light. In the quiet moments before dawn, she reviewed her findings again. Flight itineraries, transaction logs, burner phone numbers. A complex web spun by a man who wasn't just living 2 lives. He was building an empire of deception. Naomi made a decision. She would find Daniel Mercer, or Miguel Reyes, or whatever name he answered to next. And she would make sure the world heard his story. It arrived on a gray Tuesday morning, a plain brown envelope with no return address, slipped under Naomi Ridge's office door just as she was pouring her first coffee. No stamp. No mark. Just her name, scrawled in an elegant, unfamiliar hand. Curiosity overrode caution. Inside was a single, glossy photo, smaller than a postcard but impossibly vivid. It showed Daniel Mercer, or Miguel Reyes, as Naomi had come to know him, in a sun-drenched plaza in Cartagena, Colombia. His arm was draped casually around a woman's shoulders, dark-haired, striking, and unmistakably pregnant. Behind them, vibrant colonial buildings painted in pastel shades framed the scene. The woman smiled softly, a blend of contentment and sorrow in her eyes. The photo wasn't candid, it was a deliberate message. Alongside the photo was a small USB drive. Naomi slipped it into her laptop, half expecting a trap. Instead, a voice recording played, Daniel's voice, calm, almost hypnotic, as if confessing to a silent jury. I didn't run from love. I ran from the lie that love must be singular. You think I'm a monster. But I was more honest than most. I loved them all. And maybe, that's the biggest crime. His words unsettled her. There was no apology. No excuse. Only a cold clarity. Naomi rewound the recording, listening again to the layered inflections. Regret? Defiance? Or perhaps a strange kind of pride. She knew she had to act fast. This wasn't just a missing persons case anymore. It was a story about identity, truth, and the fragile nature of love itself. The photo and recording went public in a national expose Naomi published that night, one that ignited a media frenzy. Headlines screamed, "Man with 2 families now linked to 3rd woman in Colombia." Social media exploded with speculation. Was Daniel/Miguel running from something? Or chasing something? The public was hooked, torn between revulsion and fascination. But beneath the sensationalism, Naomi felt something else, a deepening mystery. Who was this 3rd woman? What had drawn Daniel so far away from everything he knew? And most hauntingly, was he trying to disappear, or to be found? She resolved to follow the trail to Cartagena, to uncover the next chapter of the man who had lived so many lives, and was still writing new ones. The morning after Naomi's expose went live, the world shifted for Claire, Julia, and their children. In Chicago, Max's day at school exploded into chaos. Whispered taunts followed him down hallways, questions he wasn't ready to answer, eyes full of judgment and curiosity. That afternoon, he got into a fight with a classmate who called his dad a liar. When Claire found him bruised and trembling, the fragile veil of their family's normalcy shattered further. Meanwhile, in Denver, Julia faced a different kind of battle. Word spread fast in a small town, rumors, judgment, suspicion. Business slowed to a trickle. Loyal customers whispered about the other woman, and some openly boycotted the bakery. Julia wrestled with guilt and anger, wondering if she'd ever reclaim her life or her dignity. Across the miles, Claire and Julia reached out to each other, not as adversaries, but as women trying to piece together a shattered puzzle. Their phone calls were hesitant at first, laced with pain and distrust. But necessity bred understanding. They began sharing details, missed birthdays, strange absences, emotional distance. Slowly, an uneasy alliance formed, built on shared betrayal and the desire for answers. At the same time, Naomi felt the weight of the story she'd unleashed. The public attention was overwhelming, but the threats were personal. Anonymous messages began flooding her inbox. Stop digging, or you'll regret it. Leave this alone, or else. Late one night, as Naomi locked up her apartment in Dallas, a shadow lingered near her door. Her heart raced, but she refused to back down. Naomi's editor called, cautioning her to be careful. But she was already preparing her next move, digging deeper into Daniel's past, determined to uncover every hidden fragment. The fallout wasn't just external. Claire found herself questioning everything, her marriage, her instincts, even her own worth. Julia battled loneliness and despair, but drew strength from the unexpected bond forming with Claire. And as the community whispered, the families fractured, and Naomi faced danger, one truth became clear. The story of Daniel Mercer wasn't over. It had only just begun. The name Valeria Mendez surfaced like a bombshell in Naomi's investigation. A local to Cartagena, the daughter of a rising political figure known for his ironclad control over the region. Valeria was everything Daniel hadn't been in his other lives, outspoken, proud, fiercely protective. Naomi tracked her down through whispers in the city's elite circles and late-night calls to contacts in Colombia. When they finally met in a sunlit cafe overlooking the harbor, Valeria's guarded eyes told a story of someone who had learned to survive in a world of power and deception. The pregnancy was real. Valeria's baby was due within months. When Naomi asked about Miguel Reyes, Valeria's voice dropped to a whisper. He's dead. She told a harrowing tale. 2 weeks earlier, Miguel had gone out on a boat with friends. A sudden storm hit. The boat capsized. Miguel was swept away. No body was recovered. Valeria's face hardened. I loved him. But he wasn't the man you think. He hid from everything, and from everyone. When he was with me, he was just trying to be free. Yet beneath her grief was a simmering anger. Valeria accused Daniel of manipulation, of playing with her heart like a pawn. Her father's political connections complicated matters, making the story dangerous to pursue. Back in the States, Naomi shared the news with Claire and Julia. The women, bruised and wary, exchanged uncertain glances. Another woman. Another life. For Claire, it was like the ground had shifted beneath her feet again. She felt the sting of jealousy mingling with an odd sympathy for Valeria's pain. Julia, meanwhile, wrestled with a new fear. If Daniel had a life in Colombia, how many more lives had he built? How deep did the deception go? Naomi warned them all, if Daniel was truly gone, the mystery might be over. But if he wasn't, then the story was far from finished. And somewhere in Cartagena, in the quiet corners of a political dynasty, Valeria waited. Pregnant, heartbroken, and ready to confront whatever, or whoever, came next. Claire's world had been fractured, but beneath her pain burned a fierce determination. She wasn't going to let Daniel slip away again, not without answers, not without confrontation. She hatched a risky plan. Feigning a serious illness, Claire used her children, Max and Ellie, as unwitting bait, knowing Daniel's protective instincts would pull him back. The lie was delicate, but convincing. She sent an anonymous message through a burner phone, hinting at a family emergency. It worked. Within days, Daniel, or Miguel or David, reached out, his voice cautious but unmistakably filled with concern. He agreed to meet, but only if it was secret. Claire knew she couldn't face him alone. She contacted Julia, who was wary but agreed to join her. Naomi, too, insisted on coming, her investigative instincts pushing her into the heart of the storm. The chosen meeting spot was a run-down motel on the outskirts of Dallas, a place neutral enough to hold fragile peace, yet private enough for the confrontation they needed. As Daniel arrived, his eyes scanned the room, registering surprise, suspicion, then resignation. Claire stepped forward, voice trembling but steady. Why? She demanded. Why did you do this to us? Before Daniel could answer, Julia appeared from the shadows, her eyes burning with hurt and anger. Naomi pulled out a recorder, documenting every moment, every word. The air crackled with tension, but then Daniel's phone rang, an unknown number flashing on the screen. The room froze. Valeria's name appeared. She was coming. Panic flickered in Daniel's eyes, but he didn't run. Instead, the four of them waited, caught in a fragile trap of truth and lies, knowing the next arrival could shatter everything, or bring it all crashing down. The motel room's silence shattered with the sudden slam of the door. Valeria stood in the doorway, eyes blazing, hand gripping a sleek pistol. Her presence was electric, a storm of fury and fear wrapped in a fragile frame swollen with pregnancy. You lied to me, she hissed, voice sharp as broken glass. All of you. Claire instinctively stepped in front of the kids, Julia beside her, while Naomi kept her camera rolling, heart pounding. Daniel's calm facade cracked for the first time. Valeria, please. This isn't what you think. But the tension was a powder keg. Valeria's finger trembled on the trigger as she scanned the room, landing on Claire, then Julia, then Naomi. The gunshot echoed, a deafening crack that seemed to freeze time. Naomi collapsed, clutching her side, blood blooming through her shirt. Chaos erupted. Daniel lunged to shield the women, but the shock broke the fragile control he'd held for so long. Police arrived moments later, summoned by a neighbor who'd heard the shot. Everyone was arrested, Valeria for assault with a deadly weapon, Daniel for conspiracy and deception, Naomi for being caught in the crossfire, Claire and Julia for their part in the confrontation. In the cold light of the interrogation room, Daniel's defenses finally fell away. "I didn't want one life," he confessed, voice heavy with exhaustion and regret. "I wanted freedom. And that's never free." The weight of his words hung in the air like a confession not just of guilt, but of a desperate, fractured soul trying to outrun a life that never fit. Months had passed since that explosive night at the motel, and life had begun to settle, though the scars remained. Naomi had survived the gunshot wound, her recovery slow but steady. Driven by determination and truth, she turned her harrowing experience into a best-selling book, The Man with Three Hearts, chronicling Daniel's tangled lives and the women caught in his web. The book became a sensation, sparking debates about love, deception, and the price of freedom. Claire and Julia, once strangers bound by betrayal, had forged an unlikely bond. Through shared pain and healing, they became pillars for each other, supporting their children, rebuilding fractured lives, and navigating a new, complicated sisterhood neither had anticipated. Valeria sat in prison, her pregnancy long past, now grappling with her own truth. She insisted to anyone who'd listen that Daniel had manipulated her, playing on her vulnerabilities to keep control. Her political family kept quiet, wary of reopening old wounds but unable to ignore the scandal that had rocked their world. And Daniel Mercer? No one knew for sure. Then, one quiet afternoon, Naomi received a mysterious package, postmarked from Lisbon, Portugal. Inside was a photo, Daniel, sun-kissed and smiling, aboard a small fishing boat on a calm, blue sea. His eyes held the same mixture of charm and sadness that had captivated and shattered so many lives. Tucked beneath the photo was a note, written in Daniel's unmistakable hand. Life number 4. You can stop chasing now. The message was clear and chilling. Daniel was still out there, still weaving his stories, still living his truths in places far beyond reach. And maybe, just maybe, he always would be.